just got the announcement. My name is Jane Bemis, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, Long Beach area. Thank you for joining us this morning as we host a discussion on the redistricting work currently underway in Long Beach. This discussion is being hosted by the League of Women Voters, the City Clerk's Office, and Common Cause. As an activist grassroots organization, League founders believe that maintaining a nonpartisan stance would protect the fledgling organization from becoming mired in the party politics of the day. We are proud to be an organization fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice. I would like to introduce the three people who you will be hearing from this morning. Please enter all of your questions into the chat box and we will try to get as many answered as possible. Monique de la Garza was appointed city clerk for the city of Long Beach in 2017 after serving the city clerk department in multiple roles since 2001. She received a Bachelor of Science in Management degree with a specialization in finance from Tulane University, Freeman School of Business. She oversees the legislative services, records, and municipal election services for the city of Long Beach. Sean Mcmorris is a policy and organizing consultant for California Common Cause. He is the founder and president of the Represent US Los Angeles San Gabriel Valley chapter. Prior to moving to the LA area, he taught English as a second language abroad and worked for a local news publication. He has a BA in political science from Columbia University and an MA in international affairs from George Washington University. Sean's work is focused on redistricting and money in politics. Jose Del Rio III is the local redistricting advocate for California Common Cause and is a native of Los Angeles, California. Before obtaining his Juris Doctor from the University of Southern California Gould School of Law in 2019, Jose served as a community organizer with Organizing for Action, where he organized around issues including gun violence, prevention, healthcare rights, climate change, and specialized in organizing in underserved and underrepresented populations. As a member of the Common Cause California team, Jose's work is focused on local redistricting efforts in California. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to the presenters. I would like now to turn it over to Jose.
Well, thank you so much, Jane, for that wonderful, wonderful introduction on this beautiful, beautiful Saturday morning. I think at this point, Sean Mcmorris should be sharing his screen. There we go. Perfect. So on behalf of California Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, and the Long Beach City Clerk's Office, I'd like to say a warm, warm thank you to everybody involved in putting this presentation together. We're extremely grateful to be in this space and to be presenting on local redistricting this morning. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to be presenting on redistricting, giving you the basics on what it is and why it's important and how you can get involved. Next slide, please. So here's a little overview of our agenda for today. We're going to go through what is redistricting. I'll take you through that. We'll talk a little bit about why it's important to local communities. My colleague, Sean Mcmorris, will take you through that. We'll talk about redistricting specifically in the city of Long Beach. It's a new time in the city of Long Beach with their independent commission. And the folks from the Long Beach City Clerk's Office will take you through that module. Finally, we'll wrap it up with how you, the viewer, can get involved and effectively participate in this public process. And then finally, we'll have questions at the end. So at this point, I'd just like to remind everybody to keep their mics on mute if you're not presenting. Also, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to drop them in chat, and myself or my colleagues will go ahead and collect them, and we'll address them at the very end of the presentation. So without further ado, next slide. Perfect. So we're going to take you through what is redistricting. Next slide. So what is redistricting? So the United States Constitution requires that political districts of the same type have the same number of residents. This is called the principle of population equality, excuse me. The goal of population equality is to make sure that each legislator represents the same number of people. So let's say we have a city, with about 20 or so people. There are 4 council districts. 20 divided by 4 is 5, right? So you're aiming to have about 5 people in each district to have population equality. This is true for districts at all levels of government, including congressional districts, state districts, and local districts. If you could click one more time, Sean, thank you so much. So give me 1 second. So sorry, my computer froze. Anyway, each district, as I said, each district must have the same amount of residents. One more time, Sean. Perfect. So you'll see this graphic animates what we just discussed, right? We have 4 districts consisting of about 5 people each and about 20 total population in total. Next slide. So over time, the population shifts, right? Children are born, people pass away, people move away because of gentrification or high housing costs. This means that some places have population growth and others have decreases in population. Because of this, districts become uneven, right? Some people lose population, some districts rather lose population, some districts increase in population, et cetera, et cetera. I believe you have one more click, Sean. Perfect. Perfect. So in this example, you can see that we went from 4 districts that were evenly broken up into 5 people per district because of gentrification, high housing costs, moving away, births of children, deaths, et cetera, et cetera. You now have uneven split of folks. You have 5 people in the top left, 8 in the top right, 4 in the bottom left, and then 7 in the bottom right. Next slide. So every 10 years, the federal government counts everyone in the country. This is called the census. We just went through this in 2020. It was so important. I'm glad everybody participated. Hopefully everybody participated. After the census is finished, district boundaries must be redrawn to even out the size of the district. Keep in mind that previous graphic we saw, right? This is called redistricting, and it happens at all levels of government. Remember, it happens at the congressional level, at the state level, at the county level, at the city level, as well as special district level. So in California, the district boundaries are redrawn for Congress, state, et cetera, right? This process of drawing new district maps is based on the census data. Census data was just released about a month ago, actually almost a month to the date. In our city, the population, and the city I'm referring to is the city on your slide. In our city, if you remember, we started with 20 people, 5 people per district, so 4 districts in total. But then we had that population growth in some areas and population decrease in others, right? So in our city, the population grew from 20 to 24, in the last 10 years. It didn't grow evenly. Remember that last graphic that had the split all over the place. So new district lines have to be drawn. Sean, one more time. That would replace the old ones. So now you have an even split, right? With the new lines, each district now contains 6 people. Next slide. Perfect. So democracy depends on voters having the opportunity to choose their representatives, right? When elected officials redraw their lines of their own districts, they get to design their own territory and choose who their voters are. Gerrymandering happens when the election district boundaries are drawn in a way that gives a particular set of people, like a political party or a racial group, an unfair political advantage over another. For better or for worse, different segments of our populations have differing political views, right? These views may be connected to race, income, where people live, where people work, and political party. Where there are differences in viewpoints, however, the way district maps are drawn can determine whether a group of people can have the ability to elect the candidate of their choice, or at least influence the outcome of elections. So in this example in front of you, we have a racial minority community that lives in the center of the state, right? If the people in charge of drawing the lines do not pay attention to where the minority community is, they might draw the district lines this way to, one more time, Sean. Perfect, thank you. So if the people in charge of drawing lines do not pay attention to where the minority community is, they might draw the district lines in this way to be perfectly compact. But as you can see by the red lines in front of you, it will split the minority population into 4 different districts. This minority community cannot elect a candidate of their choice because they only consist of 1/4 of each of the districts, right? And sometimes the way the lines are drawn, it's intended to dilute the minority population's vote. Sometimes it's not. This same dynamic plays out with any group that is politically cohesive, but have different views from those of the majority party, or majority population rather. Next slide, please. Perfect. So, but things could be different if we draw the district lines another way. This community could unite to tell the line drawers to pay attention to where they are. Now the lines, as you can see on your screen in front of you, the lines are drawn to take into consideration the community testimony, and the minority population has been made whole for the most part. The minority population makes up over 3/4 of the population in the middle district. So after equal population, the next most important rule in redistricting is the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act can provide protection for our racial and ethnic minorities in a situation like this one. Next slide. Perfect. So now that we have the basics out of the way, now we can talk about why local redistricting is so important. So for this module, I'll hand it off to my colleague, Sean Mcmorris.
Excellent. Thank you, Jose. That was a very good example of why redistricting in general is very important at all levels of government. So I'm sorry, what redistricting is. So I'm now going to talk about why it's important. And just to give you an example here, let's see, minimize this. There are thousands of hours worked and millions of dollars spent to complete the decennial census, which just happened in 2020. And so redistricting is where Census 2020 meets power building. And basically, redistricting in a nutshell determines who holds power in our communities. So in terms of local redistricting, it determines which local communities have voting strength and can elect representatives that pay attention to their needs, their wants, and all of the issues within their particular district. So to give you an example, we typically think a lot of government takes place at the federal and state level, but a lot of the things that we interact with every day or the policies that affect our everyday lives are hyper local. So for example, health equity, environmental justice, policing and law enforcement, and housing. These are all policies that are implemented at the city and county levels. So it's very important to be involved locally in your governmental process, but in particular, the redistricting process to ensure that your voice has adequate sway at whether it be city hall or the county level. So the census just determines essentially whether your jurisdiction and region get their fair share of federal resources, so the allocation of federal money. However, it's your local leaders, your local electeds who distribute that federal money across the city and your districts. So your voice, your power within your district is very important for how resources are allocated in the city, but also it's extremely important for how well you are represented in terms of how well your local elected hears you, listens to you, and acts accordingly and advocates for you. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, hit the wrong button. So let me quickly get through this. So local redistricting controls the entry point into politics, and thus it determines our future leaders at higher levels. So most people that we see who are now in Congress or our state senators, they started out as local representatives on a city council. So they're eventually going to move up. However, local redistricting determines which communities decision makers are responsive to and accountable to you. So this is why redistricting is extremely important. And I'm going to walk you through one example of a congressional district that did not have good representation as a result of bad districting or redistricting, and that is the neighborhood of Watts in Los Angeles. And the example is from 2003. In 2003, there was a freak snowstorm in the neighborhood of Watts. and it created a lot of issues for people. It was essentially an environmental disaster, and it left a lot of people without power. It caused a lot of unrest in people's lives, a lot of uncertainty. And so the people of Watts attempted to have their representatives at the congressional and state level help them address the issue, but they ran into all kinds of roadblocks. And the reason why they ran into all kinds of roadblocks is because, if you'll see here on the screen, the green portion is the neighborhood of Watts, and it was divided across it was put into 3 different congressional districts as opposed to 1. So rather than the entire neighborhood reaching out to 1 representative, they were reaching out to 3 different representatives, and a lot of them didn't know which representative was theirs. Similarly, at the state level, again, Watts was divided up into 3 different state districts. So again, not only at the federal level, but at the state level, the residents of Watts really had a big problem trying to get their representatives to address the issues that they were facing because of this freak snowstorm. And this is a quote just from a former congressional staffer at the time, and I'll just go ahead and read it. It said, "At the time of the 2003 flood, I remember our office trying to be very responsive, but there was a lot of ping-ponging of constituents between elected representatives. Watts is cut into 3 different congressional and state Senate districts. Residents who live on the same street may live in a different district. There was a lot of unnecessary frustration for constituents during a difficult time." And he ends his quote by saying, "This would have never happened if all of Watts belonged in one district." And so you might be asking yourself, well, how did that happen? Why was Watts divided up into 3 different districts? Why weren't they kept whole? Well, the short answer is, until recently in the state of California, districts at the state and congressional level were essentially drawn and created in secret by politicians. And the residents really had very little power or say in how their districts got drawn. However, the good news is California introduced and passed legislation that is known as the Voters First Act. And what that did was it created the first state fully independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. It was the first one in the whole country. There are others now, but California had the first. And essentially what that did was it took away the power of the politicians to draw those lines behind closed doors, and it created a commission that is formed by citizens who listen to residents and then draw the lines. And the politicians don't have a say in how those lines get drawn. And this is important because, 1, it has been quite successful, we believe, and 2, this is now the model that Long Beach has here at the local level. And the result of that commission, that Citizens Redistricting Commission, was that the neighborhood of Watts was made whole within 1 congressional district. And this was the product of that independent commission taking community feedback, researching, studying, listening to people, and then drawing maps based on what the community, the residents wanted, not what was most beneficial to the politicians. And so now Watts has representation where everyone in the neighborhood, they can go to 1 congressional person to help solve their needs, as opposed to that ping-ponging that was occurring that the former congressional aide was talking about. And so that's what independent commissions can do. That is what the power of people advocating for good districts can do. And with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over now to Monique with the city clerk's office, so that she can kind of walk you through how you now can advocate and participate in Long Beach's redistricting process.
Well, good morning, everybody. Let's see, can we hit the next slide? I'm not sure who has perfect. So, and one more. So Long Beach has its own independent redistricting commission. And the last time redistricting occurred in Long Beach was 2011, when the city council adopted the current map after directing staff to conduct the whole process. And in this new process to redraw the city council boundaries, everything changed in 2018 when voters approved the charter amendment to create the Long Beach Independent Redistricting Commission. Through the charter amendment, the commission's been given the exclusive authority to redraw the district boundaries and adopt the new map through an open, independent, and transparent process. One of the changes that really makes this process unique to Long Beach is, for the first time, redistricting is independent of the mayor and council. And so some of you probably remember the old process, and it was very much the city manager and the city council making all of those decisions. Next slide, please. What also makes this new process different from previous redistricting efforts is the charter amendment that outlines very strict and guidelines and restrictions which members of the community were eligible to become commissioners, and they were not appointed by the mayor and city council, similar to other city commissions. So the commissioners on this slide were selected after a thorough application and selection process, which resulted in an overwhelming response with a total of 400 applications submitted. We began outreach for this recruitment and selection process in August of 2019, which continued through the application period open from April through June of last year, which is probably most of you remember was very, very difficult time during COVID, and we were really challenged with that whole recruitment process, but I think we were very, very successful, and thankfully people in Long Beach wanted to participate in this process and be on this commission. So although COVID created many challenges, we were able to create a very diverse pool of applicants through an extensive outreach effort, partnering with our community groups through the Long Beach Census and Complete Count Committee. And we created a wide range of advertisements, launching outreach campaigns in English, Khmer, Spanish, Tagalog, to really incorporate everybody in Long Beach. We are a very diverse community. And after the initial review of the applications, city staff determined that there were 354 eligible applicants. And our ethics commission was tasked to select a subpool of 20 to 30 applicants with at least 2 from each council district that reasonably reflected the diversity of the city. And once the subpool was established, after reviewing all the applications and selecting 45 candidates for interviews, the Ethics Commission randomly selected the first 9 commissioners, 1 from each district. Those first 9 redistricting commissioners then selected the last 4 members and 2 alternates. Next slide, please. So the full commission began meeting in January of this year and has gone through extensive training and conducted 11 outreach meetings leading up to the upcoming map hearings. Another unique charter requirement for the commission is that meetings have to be held in each current council district. So the commission was fortunate to hold hybrid and in-person virtual meetings in 6 of the 9 districts. And this is when COVID was shutting everything down. So we wanted to make sure that we still allowed people to participate through the hybrid, but also we were in the communities for people who chose to show up in person. And the remainder of the redistricting process, as we mentioned earlier, is in the final stage of adopting a new map. So the process begins on this coming Wednesday, October 20th, with the selection of 3 draft maps by the commission from public submissions and the commission directed draft maps drawn by the commission demographer. The following meeting on October 27th will be where members of the community can provide feedback and suggestions on the initial draft maps, and the commission will provide any additional changes to the maps for further consideration. And at the November 10th meeting, the commission will select the proposed final map to be adopted at the November 18th meeting. Next slide, please. So you can participate in the redistricting meetings by attending in person or submitting written public comment. The commission will also accept and is still accepting draft map and community of interest form submissions through the remainder of the process. To receive updates on meetings, you can visit our website at longbeach.gov and redistricting, where you can also find meeting recordings of all the previous meetings, all the submitted draft map plans, and all the additional resources that have led us up to this point. Next, I think that's our last slide. So I'm going to turn it over now to effective public participation to Jose and Sean.
Excellent. Thank you, Monique. And this will be our last portion before we open it up to Q&A. So I'll just jump right in to this. And I just want to preface that so Long Beach began this process months ago. Their commission did, and they have been collecting for months testimony from the community, both at these various district-specific meetings and general meetings, but also over they've been receiving written testimony that people have submitted as well. So I bring that up because some people are comfortable speaking publicly, others would prefer to write in, and you can do either. And really what you want to do in that testimony, and I've seen a lot of very good testimony throughout this process as I've monitored these meetings in Long Beach, is you really want to focus on describing and letting the commissioners know what your communities of interest are. And we shorten that to we often call it COI, C-O-I, and for short. And that is what the commission is really looking for when they hear people speak. And so I wanted to give kind of just a brief introduction of what communities of interest, or COI, are. And basically, COI is your story. It represents your needs and your concerns, as well as the concerns of the people that you live with and live around you. So it's what makes your community a community. So essentially, you may be looking at a district and say, well, I don't know everyone in that district or what every neighborhood wants or needs. You really don't have to. You really have to just advocate for your community of interest, your area, and essentially why it needs to remain whole within one district or not. And so that is kind of the purpose of collecting this community of interest, so that the commission can do their best to make sure that these like-minded communities remain together, so that their voice and voting power is strong. And so shared interests and needs essentially equals voting power and responsive electeds. So that's why it's important to advocate for your communities of interest and speak up and let the commission know who you are and what your communities of interest are. And I'll just point out on the left, or I'm sorry, the right here, the city has created a very handy electronic community of interest form that you can submit online. Again, this can be found on their website, and it essentially lays everything out for you, and then you type in, it can be as much as you want or as little as you want, and submit it to, hit submit, and it goes to the commission, and they will look at it. So briefly, I wanted to kind of identify what some communities of interest might be. The first bullet point we have here is an example of communities of interest that might unite your area. And that includes culture, language, public amenities, values, income, history, landmarks, local economy, and schools. And then some examples of communities of interest where you share similar issues or needs within your community might be housing, traffic, crime, pollution, green space or lack thereof, employment opportunities, and maybe food deserts. So those are just some examples of things that you might bring to the attention of the commissioners when you're presenting your community of interest testimony. And I want to point out now we are in kind of the next phase of the redistricting process in Long Beach. So for the last several months, the commission has been collecting testimony or community of interest testimony, which I will refer to as the pre-draft map phase of the process, which means no lines have been drawn yet. The commission had not given any direction to their demographer to draw any lines. They were simply collecting information before they do that. Now we're at the next phase where draft maps have been drawn and they're now being presented to the community. And now we begin that second stage of community feedback where you, the residents, will provide critiques or further testimony about what you like or dislike about a particular map or multiple maps that are being presented. So it's a continuation of earlier testimony, but it's more detailed and refined now that you're actually looking at proposed maps. And so how might you give effective testimony at this draft map phase? So here's some things that you should consider. Do you like the lines for your district? And this map on the left, by the way, is your current, these are 2010 lines, so they could change. And then if you do like the lines, which draft maps do you like those lines on? What and why or why not? So if you like a particular, the district that you're in a draft map that you reside in, you want to articulate why you like that. For example, because it includes particular libraries that my children attend often, or schools that I go to, or much of the people in that community are renters, and it includes a lot of renters. So those are some examples. And you should be specific. You should cite landmarks and streets that encompass your community of interest. And you can explain why the district lines are good or bad for your community or your community of interest to the commission. And one thing that's very handy, and I will say is much easier this time around during redistricting than as opposed to 10 years ago, is it's much easier for residents now to actually submit maps to the commission. There is a very handy, there's open source software that you can use. And the Long Beach Commission on their website, they use two different softwares, open source software. One is called Maptitude, one is called District R. And it actually, and they have a short training tutorial on their website for those who want to use it. And you can log on and you can look at Long Beach and the current district lines, and it gives you demographic information, census data information, and it allows you to outline on those maps your actual community of interest and submit it to the commission and let them know that's your community of interest, why it needs to be whole, and explain why you do or don't like current district lines. The other thing that you can do is you can actually print off a paper map of this of the current districts, and you can draw on it and submit it to back to the commission, either via email or you can mail it into them. And all of that information is on the city's redistricting webpage or website. So those are things that are very effective, and they really help articulate what your communities of interest are. And so your opinion, this is something I want to emphasize a lot. Your opinion makes a really big difference, especially now that Long Beach is operating under this independent commission format. So, and this is the first time in Long Beach that the community, as opposed to politicians, are drawing the district line. So you may have thought your opinion didn't matter in the past. I think that's different this time around. So if you were on the fence about participating, please participate. And the Long Beach commissioners, the commission is made up of residents just like you, and they represent a quite diverse makeup across the city, and they come from each district within the city. And I will say this from experience, the the Long Beach commissioners are listening carefully to what you have to say. I've monitored most of the meetings. They're very attentive. You should not be intimidated. They're not intimidating folks. And one reason I know they've been paying close attention is because they recently gave direction to their demographer to come back with several different draft maps. And each of them articulated a list of things that they wanted to see. And they had to do with testimony that they had received throughout this process from different communities of interest. So they're listening, your voice matters, and it can make a difference. And so this is an opportunity where you now have the power to really make democracy in Long Beach what you would like it to be. And with that, I just want to, before we open it up to Q&A, these two websites I think are important that you should look at if you have any more questions. Certainly the Long Beach Independent Redistricting Commission's website, we have the link there. We've really been, Common Cause has been promoting Long Beach's redistricting website as an ideal website to other jurisdictions, an example of a one-stop shop for finding all of your answers. So I can say that Long Beach's website has done a very good job on providing a lot of information to the community so that they can effectively participate. And then the other site I'll just promote is California Common Cause has a webpage that's totally dedicated just to local redistricting, and it's called Local Redistricting 2021. We have the link there, but we have template examples of community testimony. We kind of break down the various state laws and federal laws if people are interested in that. So those are some resources that you might find interesting that you can go and do further research on. And with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Maggie, and we'll engage in some question and answer.
Thank you, Sean, Jose, Monique, those very good presentations. We've made notes of the questions. So the first question is, what happens next? When the maps are final, how are existing city council members impacted by the new districts? I think, Sean, you're going to take that question.
Yes, I can take this question, and I'll just briefly say there's a short answer and a more detailed answer. The short answer is that council members will remain after these new lines are drawn. If a council member ends up in a different district than what they were elected into, they will remain in office until that, as an at-large member, until that the election for that district occurs again. And the more detailed explanation is that, so if a council member of an odd numbered district, which is 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9, is drawn out of their district, that council member represents their district until a new council member is seated in December 2022. And for the other districts, which are the even number ones, the same process occurs, but that happens in 2024. So the revised maps that are being created now for the 2022 elections, they will go into effect. They won't go into effect until the council members assume office in December 2022, but they'll be used for determining district boundaries for the 2022 election. So, and I'll just add, for any questions about that you may think we haven't answered adequately, please always feel free to email the city clerk with your questions, because the city clerk can then get you answers as well throughout this whole process.
I have to, thank you. Let's go to the next question. Mike, how can we see the actual street names? Bluff Heights Neighborhood Association is currently represented by Districts 2 and District 3. What is now being proposed?
Hi, this is JT from the city clerk's office, and I can take that one. So the The maps that are going to be on the website right now, and actually I'll just share my screen and kind of go over the website real quick. So the maps are all located on our submitted maps page, which is you can go to the mapping tool, hit submitted maps, or just do view draft maps right here, or draft map submissions. There's a few different ways to get there. And then once you get to this page, we have the complete list of all the draft maps submitted here. It's a pretty large document, so it's takes a little to load. But what you can actually do is, for right now, the maps that were drawn by our consultant, the redistricting partners, with the priorities that the commission submitted at the last meeting, you can actually click on it, and then it'll take you to HTML link, and then you can zoom in to the actual districts and see where the actual boundaries are. And right now it's only available for the, unfortunately right now it's only available for the maps that were drawn by the demographer, but we are working to get all the other maps submitted by the public, and you can go to that link right here, and it has all the public map submissions. It's a pretty large file as well. We're trying to get those ones up prior to the meeting, so then you will be able to kind of zoom in on any of the public submitted maps as well.
And this, let me just also kind of note, because we've received phone calls in our office. Please don't try and do this on your phone. It's better if you're at a computer with a large screen that has lots of memory, because these are very large files, and we've received calls from people trying to do this on their phone and not understanding why it's not working, or they're getting errors. Again, these are huge files, they're maps, they're very detailed. So you really need to look at these on a computer.
Yeah, and we'll also have a printed copy of all the maps and background materials for the maps available. You can come to City Hall. I believe we're going to try to have it printed on Monday, but Tuesday at the latest, that we'll have that ready for anyone who wants to come in person to kind of flip through the maps and look through it themselves. And then they could just come to City Hall on the lobby level and go to the window number 13.
Is it possible for me to ask JT a follow-up question?
Certainly.
JT, I just didn't follow. If I want to see where District 2 and 3 boundaries are on the proposed maps, where do I find that?
So right here is on the mapping page. So there's 5 different plans that are outlined right now, that the commission directed the demographer to look. So if you click like the link right here, the full web map plan, this first one is 10% deviation of the population, and then the second map is a 5% deviation of the similar map. So once you go into the map, you'll be able to see the districts aren't numbered, but they are labeled by color and letters. So CD2, currently CD2 and CD3, that would be this area. So you can kind of scroll in to see on a more granular level what the exact streets are of each border of the 2 districts right here that are currently CD2 and CD3. So this would be the area.
So there are currently 5 different maps that are being considered?
So I think there's 70, I think there's a little over 70 submissions that the commission's considering. I think there are about 20, a little over 20 of them are full draft map plans, but then several of them are, let me try to see if I can, several of them are just partial draft maps. So if you look at, let's see.
And so what we mean by partial draft maps is if somebody just had a submission for their community of interest, they weren't necessarily trying to map the entire city, but they wanted the commission to know that this was their community of interest, and those are the partial submissions. So we have 2 different types of maps that they're considering.
Yeah, so like for this one, it's just a map of North Long Beach redistricting. So they did like 2 kind of markups of what they think would be. And then the larger versions of these are further down in the document. And then we're hoping to get a link to zoom these in hopefully on Monday or Tuesday prior to the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, JT.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we just did go through the maps. So the next question is there a way to amend our city charter on redistricting concerning the census every 10 years, whereas election certification and where incumbents and potential candidates reside? Changing districts also affects important issues concerning the entire district. Example, moving my District 1 entirely to the west of the LA River changes many things and issues.
So I can take a stab at this question, and I appreciate this question's a little complex, so I'm going to keep it basic, and if there's more detail from the questioner, they can contact our office. So in order to change the city charter, the citizens of Long Beach can do that by a petition, which is a very lengthy and expensive process, but it is absolutely possible. It would require a certain number of signatures from the registered voters in the city of Long Beach to put that together and to get that on a ballot. But it has been done. There's also, the council can put a ballot measure on the ballot. So you can do one of 2 things. You can petition your council to put something on a ballot, and our charter amendment committee will review it and put it on the ballot, or you can do a citizen initiative and circulate a petition. And I think that's the simple answer to that question is if you want to change the charter, then that's how you would change the charter.
Thank you, Monique. Okay, next question. Is there a way we can make it possible for the upcoming election if the incumbent and potential candidates remain in their current districts until the primary results come in June 7th, 2020? If a runoff occurs, both candidates must move and qualify before November 3rd. We are potentially going to have chaos in the upcoming primaries with many people buying an apartment in a new district to qualify. Some of us have family and are on leases that will have to be broken.
So I'll take a quick stab at this again. And I think part of the answer is in Sean's response to the earlier question about what happens next. But also, I just want to point out that our city charter has specific language that candidates have to live in their district 30 days preceding the last day of nomination. So, you know, making that change, you would have to change the requirements of a council member through the charter. So again, that kind of goes back to if you want to change the city charter, it has to be through a petition, or the council would have to change the residency requirements. There's also a charter section now for the Independent Redistricting Commission that states that the commission should not be considering the incumbents through this redistricting process. So although I understand there's some concern that it might be confusing in the next election for candidates who may be moved to a new district, we cannot consider that in the redistricting process. And we still have to enforce the residency requirements when we're talking about nomination and candidates. So I think that's going to be most impactful for the candidates who are up for election in 2022, which are the odd districts. It might be that some of these council members no longer live in the district that they currently are representing. And they're going to have to make that decision when nomination time comes around, whether or not they need to reside, move or run for the district that they are now living in going forward. So those are going to be some tough questions that the candidates have to answer, but I think that's something that is Separate from the current redistricting process, our commissioners need to take into account what is best for Long Beach going forward for the next 10 years, not just this next election cycle.
This is Sean. I'll just add in general to because this happens in, across redistricting, all jurisdictions, the lines change. The ultimate goal is to ensure that regardless of whether an incumbent stays within that district or not, that the community or the residents within that district, they are solidified enough that they're going to be able to elect someone who adequately represents them and their needs. So it may be that they really like a particular candidate who may not end up being in their district now. That again, that for those people who really like them, that's probably not ideal. But at the same time, if the districts are drawn correctly, those individuals will have the opportunity to solidify their vote and elect someone who they're going to be happy with. So the alternative is a non-independent commission where the politicians pick their voters as opposed to the voters picking their politicians. So not everyone's going to be 100% happy all of the time, but ideally with an independent commission, a majority of people will be satisfied with the end process.
Thank you, both of you. Okay, the next question. What about congressional redistricting? My congressional district changed last time.
I'll take this one. So if you remember a little bit earlier in the presentation, we talked about how things were changing, not only for the city of Long Beach, because it's their first year having an independent commission, but also changing throughout the state because of the Voters First Act, or Voters First Act, I believe it's called. Basically under that act, California has an independent commission, very similar to Long Beach's independent commission, which means that citizens from all over the state of California right now, as we speak, are serving on a commission who are also drawing maps for congressional districts as well as state assembly districts. So right now, the California State Citizens Redistricting Commission, or CRC as we call it, is currently reviewing COI testimony. It's at a very similar point as Long Beach. In fact, they're almost identical in terms of where they are at. They're considering COI testimony, they're evaluating it, trying to put together draft maps that they can present to the commission, or excuse me, to the public in the near future. So right now it's imperative not only that folks get involved in Long Beach, but also get involved at the state and the county, congressional level, et cetera, et cetera. So everything that we've gone over, except for the Long Beach specific ways to participate, like the COI form, et cetera, there's a state equivalent that you can find. There's a COI form, there's a way to draw maps, and I'm dropping the link in chat. And for those who are listening, I think we have somebody listening on their phone. The link is wedrawthelinesca.org. So you can go to wedrawthelinesca.org, and then you can find more information about how to participate in the state process, learn more about what they're considering, learn more about how you can participate in giving COI testimony, in drawing maps, in critiquing maps, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, thank you, Jose. The next question we have is, are all of the comment and testimony submissions publicly available?
Yes, all the map submissions are on that website that I previously showed. And then also for any comments or handouts that were provided to the commission via email or e-comment, by mail, or handed out at the actual meeting, we attach those to the file IDs on the agenda. And those are available on the city clerk's calendar page for the meetings.
Great, thank you, JT. We have a question. I don't know that it's gotten onto the Google Doc yet, but will any map drawn and approved start with District 1 and move right? For example, District 7, current District 7 will not start, then move to District 1, then 2, then 3. Is that, did I read that right, Mr. Charlie?
Yes, my question is, when you look at a map, like in front of you, would the current 7 and 1 share the west side? Would it then be starting at 1, then the new downtown district people are wanting would start 2, 3, etc.? When you're looking at a map, it would not start District 7, then 1, then 2. So that's my question. When looking at a map, like in front of you, it would not start at 7, it would start at 1. Is that correct?
So right now, the maps are in a draft map phase. So they aren't being numbered at all. And then one of the charter criteria is to keep as many people in the same district number as possible. So the numbering would come, I think, a little bit later in the process, once like kind of the boundaries are more set. As of right now, all of the maps that are being submitted, they're all just submitted draft maps that the commission is looking at, and then they're going to work to kind of narrow down and develop the boundaries as we go along in the process. So that's kind of early for that numbering kind of to come into effect, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And then we have someone who's confused on how to determine what is now being considered for Bluff Heights. I look at the maps, but it is not clear where the lines are drawn. How many maps should I be looking at?
So as of right now, the commission is considering all of the maps that are in that document. And then that will be narrowed down to about 3 plans, hopefully this upcoming Wednesday at the October 20th meeting. So if you have specific communities of interest, like mentioned, like Bluff Heights, if you want to keep that in a certain district, I would more recommend that you submit comments to the commission or attend the meeting. And then you could let the commission know that your concerns. And then once the 3 maps are out there, you'll have a better idea of what direction the commission is going in.
And when you submit your testimony, make sure you define what you consider Bluff Heights. That you're saying, I consider Bluff Heights to be, Broadway to Ocean. Again, I'm just hypothetically, Sherry or Wanapero over to whatever. What do you consider Bluff Heights? It's very important to communicate that to the commission, because sometimes people come and they say Bluff Heights, but for some people it means one thing and for others something else. So make sure that you've identified your specific boundaries for your community of interest.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just add quickly. I've gotten some private messages, and I'm just kind of looking at them, just seeing them now. But I think there was one question about the dates for Long Beach City Council elections, and I'm correct. I might be getting this wrong, but I think the question was, which council seats are up in 2022 and in this coming election? And if I refer back to the answer from the earlier question, it looks like that Council District 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are going to be up for election. And is it June, or what's the month?
June 7th, and we also have our citywide offices. So redistricting doesn't necessarily affect the citywide offices, but they are also up for election. They will be on the June 7th ballot, which is the mayor, the city auditor, the city prosecutor, and the city attorney.
Okay, yeah. And it may be the case too that the district you're currently in, it may retain its same number. That number may not change. You'll know if it does, but it's my understanding that if lines are adjusted, that I think there's charter language. Again, please email the city clerk to verify this, but it's my understanding that when they do the renumbering, if a particular district, which is numbered now, retains a majority of its current residencies or population, then it will keep that number for its district. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. You may very likely stay in your same district. So
Thank you. I don't see any additional questions. If anybody in the audience has something more they want to ask.
Sorry, just Donna again. So for me to advise my community members, the best way for everyone to communicate with the commission is to go to longbeach.gov/redistricting and use that form. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the best way probably for the upcoming meeting would just to email redistricting@longbeach.gov. And then you can also provide this community of interest, fill out that form. And then also you can use the mapping tools to create your community of interest in one of the tools. The maps that are currently being submitted won't be considered by the commission until the October 27th meeting, because we do have like a 7-day posting kind of best practice that we're using right now. But if you do submit, or you can use the mapping tool, print it out and bring it to the meeting and give it to the commission. We do request 20 copies for all 15 commissioners and staff, if you do go in that route.
Thank you.
Yeah, excuse me, just to drill down on that a little bit, we always say there's 3 ways of participating in the redistricting process at this particular point. The first is to submit your COI testimony either verbally or using the Long Beach Independent Redistricting Commission's COI form, which you can find on their website. That's a little bit, we're a little bit past that phase, but you can still submit your COI testimony. The second way is to submit a draft map like yourself, as JT outlined a little bit earlier. You can do that via paper or you can do that online. And thank you so much to the commission for accepting both. Please express our thanks for that. And then the third way is to actually critique the draft maps that are being put out right now. So that could be verbal comments or written comments, depending on whatever you're comfortable with. You can go on those links that we linked in chat, look at the draft maps that are being considered, look at the boundaries, look at the communities of interest that are being retained and being cut up or so on and so forth. And then give your opinion, critique them, use the tips that Sean used in his module. To say they're great, they're bad, they could just use a little bit of refinement, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the 3 main ways you can participate at this point.
and I'll just add too, because this question's come up in other jurisdictions for people who are critiquing draft maps. The draft maps that are presented, and you'll be presented with multiple draft maps, it's not an all or nothing. I like map A, therefore, or I don't like. They're interchangeable. It's totally fine for you to say, I like districts 1, 3, and 4 in map A, but I like districts 5, 6, and 7 in map B or C, and here's the reasons why. And that's important information for the commission to know, because these maps are malleable. It's not all or nothing. They're taking your feedback now so that they can go back and readjust these draft maps to eventually get to a final draft map that most people are hopefully happy with.
Excellent. Are there other questions? If not, then I think we can finish this session. Thank you so much to Common Cause and the City Clerk's Office. It's very informative and very good information. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for participating.